Hello, everybody. Welcome to Swish for Real Basketball. Uh, Producer, let me start the show tonight. We got a good show for you tonight. We're going to talk a lot about the Spurs and no special guests. Hopefully, Wild Dog, our other associate producer, will join us. Uh, so we're going to talk about the Spurs for quite a while, and then we're going to talk about Cleveland. And so we're going to jump right in and going to ask Big Mike. So we talked about who would talk with each Spurs. So the Spurs legacy, David Robinson. Uh, what is your viewpoint on his legacy?
David Robinson, I think he had a great legacy coming out of Navy. He played quite a few years with San Antonio. Um, I think he was the catalyst as far as helping Tim Duncan get to a better level defensively, because Tim Duncan was known for defense in college at Wake Forest, but the Duncan and Robinson, they were the twin towers back in the day when they won the championship with San Antonio. With Robinson's legacy, yeah, without Tim Duncan, I don't think he would have a great legacy, because he didn't have the ability to win a championship by itself. And it wasn't until Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich took over as coach when they started winning the championships. And so, with that being said, I think David Robinson does have a great legacy now, but it wouldn't be much of a legacy if it wasn't for Tim Duncan.
So, little trivia question. You know how I like the little nuggets. Do you know how that the Spurs ended up with Tim Duncan?
How did the Spurs end up with Tim Duncan? Was it
He's
a
obviously the first pick, but do you know why the Spurs got the first pick?
wasn't it a trade prior to that season?
No. So David Robinson had a major injury and he was out most of the year. And the lottery had started, but they had the worst record. So because David Robinson didn't play the year before, the Spurs actually had a high lottery pick, and it wound up being the first pick to get Tim Duncan.
So I thought he went to the Navy for a few years or year, and then that was the reason why he didn't play.
They drafted him when he was still in the Navy. He had a few years off, and then he played. But he had a year, at least a year, a couple years before, but he was injured. Another trivia question: do you remember who he was fighting for the scoring title and had to score big time points at the last regular season game to win a scoring title?
Two people come to mind. Number one, it would be Shaq. And the
Ding, ding,
other
ding,
one,
ding, 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 ding.
it was Shaq.
Yeah. Shaq
Dang.
could put up like 40, 45 points, and Robinson had to score like 50 plus points to pass
And he
Shaq.
did it. Yeah. Dang.
So,
Yeah,
so,
that's that. I guess my memory is not too bad.
so people forget about that David Robinson could score.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're talking when, Shaq was in Orlando and then he had to go up against him when he was a Laker.
Yeah, that was a tough matchup for the Lakers. Anytime they faced off against Robinson and Duncan and Ginobili and Tony Parker, all of them kids, well, men rather, they gave them the fits, and that's why they were so good. And they had everything that you needed as far as the team go, and that's why they won the championships that they won.
So there's a third piece to David Robinson. Do you know how far he took Navy in the NCAA tournament?
It had to have been Final Four.
He took them to the Final Four.
What year was that?
I'd have to look it up. It'd have been in the mid 90s, late 90s. It
Yeah, it
looks
had
like
to have
we
been.
got Wild Dog trying to join us here in a few minutes. But anything else you can remember or that stuck out about David Robinson?
Well, I know I wanted to talk about Tim Duncan, but I think David Robinson is a better subject matter because of where he come from as far as the Navy taking San Antonio and him and Tim Duncan taking him to the championships. But the only thing I can think about is how he played against Elijah for those few years that Elijah did play. Well, Elijah was on the back end of his career, but there's been some great battles between him and Elijah, and then Shaq took over after that. So it was pretty much an era where the center was something some of the most prominent centers played during that era. And now that we have come to this era in the 20,000s, I guess you can say the 2000s. Now the centers are either stretching the floor or hardly any of them does what David Robinson and Tim Duncan does as far as playing in the low post. But you can get way more points if you learn to play low post. And I think with Gafford going to 2024-25 Mavericks, he's starting to play a lot better in the low post as well as Lively. So if I had to compare the two versus David Robinson and Tim Duncan, I would probably give the nod to the Spurs because we still have a lot more to grow with Gafford and Lively.
So we'll talk about the triplets, but there were 2 or 3 really good centers in that era in the East. You had Patrick Ewing with the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
You had Brad Daugherty with the Cavaliers.
Mm-hmm.
You had Bill Laimbeer with the Pistons.
And you also had Mourning with Charlotte.
You had Alonzo Mourning with Charlotte, and then Miami. You also
Ronnie
had we
Then they
got
had Ronnie
Wild Dog in the house. Woo, 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 woo.
You on mute, my guy.
And you got the center for Chicago.
What was his name?
Before Luke Longley, they had a guy, so in the 90s. So anyhow, that's a good wrap up, and we'll talk about Duncan here in a minute. So Mr. Wild Dog, how's your evening going?
I'm blessed to be here, brother. Appreciate it.
Well, we'll talk about the triplets.
Check out my artwork, guys.
Yeah, babe.
Hey, all
Pretty
right.
nice.
I was able to hear something about David Robinson.
So we just started we're covering the Spurs legacy, and so I started off the show, and Big Mike did David Robinson, and so I know how you like the VHS tapes and the black and whites, and huddling up to the radio and listening. But and you're welcome to add too. But what about the player legacy that you had picked, George Iceman Gervin?
Yes, Iceman. I mean, I know we like to bring the data, so let me start off with with some numbers for you. All right.
Yeah. Shout out to Cerebro, man. Cerebro, salute.
Yes, and then I'll get into the Phillies. All right. so well, I guess I can't really even do it without some Phillies, some feel good. So everybody, a part of that, my job, the black and white old VHS tape, the old 8mm film, is that, I'm one of those persons that I'm not going to allow you to forget the ABA, the American Basketball Association. So George Gervin's first professional contract was with the Virginia Squires, and he earned $40,000 per year as a premier player. Just let that sink in a minute. I didn't have the time to figure out, okay, what's that equivalent in today's numbers, but from that, what I really remember, even as a kid, was stories and comments even later as I came along in the 70s, was about his contract when he was traded to the San Antonio Spurs in the middle of the season in 1974. And that contract was for $228,000 a year.
Nice.
So for me, I know there's a lot of other things going on, right? That for me let me know that the San Antonio Spurs were for real about winning and then about putting on a good show, because this for me was kind of the real true pull a trigger of the trigger for picking up free agents, and basically going and sparing no expense, having a conversation with the man and not necessarily giving the man what he wants, but doing what it is you need to do for the betterment of your organization and for your show. It's sports entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then from there, I just want to go straight into the story of my childhood. So that's the numbers, because I feel like he had a great impact on what the players are getting now. He was clearly, did his part, what I'm saying, and making sure players got recognized and compensated, not just necessarily for their performance on the court, but for what they brought in their whole brand. You know what I'm saying? The movement they made with regard to, performance on the court, TV, merchandise, and speaking of merchandise, posters. So my brother and I, my mother moved us from Louisville closer to work on Fort Knox in Radcliffe. So we went from, a house in the hood having our own bedrooms to sharing an apartment, a room in an apartment. And so a lot of things we had to leave behind, some things we had to reorganize. And there came a point in negotiating the decoration of our room together. The one thing we had in common that was beyond debate was, of course, basketball. And of course, then living in Radcliffe, a little town, but if you had, we grew up around farm and doing stuff with our hands. We weren't lazy kids. We weren't, we didn't play outside. We believed in work, cutting grass. I really got a niche in myself in doing gardening. So we always had a little bit of something money. And my mother said, now the wall, when you open up the door and the wall facing the door, we could not decorate. So the side walls and everything else we could decorate. And my brother and I, being, of course, creative minds as we were like, oh, we looked at each other. We can do the ceiling now, because we had popcorn instead of frosting. We had popcorn, so we could actually put stuff up on the ceiling. That's one of the first things we noticed, is that we could actually put something on the ceiling. So we were just fine. We didn't give any pushback to our mother, and some things we lost when we got posters. And my mother's like, "Oh, you can't this keep it a certain size," because apartments is regulated. It's weird sometimes. And there it was. We had not even seen one, because, of course, we're in Kentucky. And then there it was. We saw George Gervin. And not just any image of George Gervin. George Gervin sitting upon a throne. And
nice.
Not just upon any throne. You got the Game of Thrones, Game of Swords, you get all kind of stuff, but a throne of ice.
And
not just some cheap thrown together thing, not some glass, where it looked weird, you know what I mean? It was sculpted and smoothed out and elevated, and we stood there with both our mouths open.
Now, who gave y'all the poster? Y'all found it, or?
No, when you flip through the little panels and you're flipping through,
Are you talking about in the magazine?
No, like in the when you go
like
to
Spencer.
I know
Like
you're talking about. Yeah.
Almost like a gallery, like you flip it through like
when you go to a record store and they have those little panels with the posters in it. I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah. And so, sorry about it. Thank you. So, and we were like, yeah, but they ain't going to have it, right? So we asked, I was like, oh, yes, we have those. And then my brother was like, yes. I was like, wait. I was like, do you have the jumbo? I think that was like a 20 by 30 or something like like almost, instead of the 14 by anyway, instead of the standard size, the jumbo. And my brother looked at me, he's like, we can't have anything that big. I was like, shh, wait, we're gonna work this. And she goes, yes, but we have a special order and you have to wait. We don't mind waiting. and actually the cost of it, right? She just looked at it. I said, the cost of it, whatever it was like $1 more. It was like something like, maybe it was my share. I'm trying to think my memory, right? Maybe my share of it, right? Splitting in two plus splitting in half. Maybe my share was $1 more, but it may have just been $1 more, bro. And my brother was like, I don't want to wait. This is my brother being who he is. I want it now. Get the one. We can't get anything. We can't, not supposed to have anything there. I said, just trust me. So, and I like, look at the price of it. You want the little one or you want the jumbo, the big one? And I'm selling them, right? And it finally comes in. And when it comes in, of course, they call you at your house. You know what I'm saying? And then my mother takes the call. Y'all got something. We'll be by there tomorrow. And of course, then our mother's with us. And I'm nervous. And my brother's just eyeballing me like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what's going to happen? And then my mother was like, well, which one is it? She was excited for us. Not that she cared anything about sports. Oh, Mom, it's this one. Oh, that's awesome. That's cool. That's cool. She trying to be cool. Whatever language we was using at the time, and while I'm talking to my mother, I told my brother, just get it. But my mother wasn't sweating it, and my mother had been asking, when y'all said y'all was gonna do the ceiling. Yeah, that's creative. Y'all haven't done anything yet. Oh yeah, we trying to get it together. We already had it mapped out on a piece of paper. You know what I'm saying? Everything that we had on the sides was done. My brother had his wall on the side. I had my wall on the side done. Baseball, football, basketball too, and then the side, the wall facing the door, we couldn't touch. And then the ceiling. So we put this jumbo of George Gervin on his Iceman throne in the middle of the ceiling, because we had twin beds but facing where we would be upright facing us, and then mapped out all the other normal size posters around him.
Dang.
And all while our absolute favorite number one, him and I voting, going at it together, was Dr. J, Julius Erving, was our number one. But as I said again, sometimes a persona, an image, and even like now we call them content creators, do something that even supersedes, you know what I'm saying? Your thing. You can have multiple players, and even now, these days, multiple teams. We weren't San Antonio Spurs fans. We were definitely Iceman fans, but we were hardcore 76er fans, hardcore Dr. J, but there's no way we could not have the appreciation for the sweet smoothness and almost like a finger roll jump shot at times, of George Gervin. So that's the story I wanted to make sure I got out, from my childhood, of how it impacted a young man and my love for the game, my love for personalities, my love for, people who were larger, who seemed larger than life,
So let me ask you this question though. Whatever happened to the poster?
There's no telling.
Dang.
Because when my brother left the house, we had to move. So
and that poster will be worth a pretty penny right about now.
So we had to move. And so with each, we moved like across adjacent up the street.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, then, we didn't do the ceiling. It was a lot of things it was less we could do in that place. And I want to say my brother, when he moved, he took it with him.
Dang.
We did a lot of at that point we had started doing a lot of like our newspaper clippings, especially Louisville Cardinals clippings. We had put into like photo albums or like in a large flip books. We had started that already. We had started putting things in the flip books. And then there was one wall It's like the wall facing the wall facing the door, no. And then that wall next to the door, because you could literally see that wall, that was a no. So it was the wall that was above the chest of drawers where we had the little 13-inch black and white TV. It was that wall, and it was stuffed, you know. So George was, Iceman was too big, you know. And I remember we had it. It was in the closet. I'm pretty sure my brother took it with him.
Dang.
When we moved from there to Germany, I don't remember seeing it again. I'm pretty sure my brother took it with him. And then my brother leaving, I could clearly see where it's like, Junior, take this with you. You know what I'm saying? Protect it, take it with you. No telling. And then, and then I don't want to take too much longer, but there's also a story when I actually got to meet George Iceman Gervin.
Okay.
And it was in Dallas, and I believe it was around forgive me with the year, but it was part of the joint venture with the NBA and the USO, and soldiers were coming in the masses at this time. Whatever front we had was being mainly shut down, so soldiers were coming in by the masses from the front, and so we were going to be out there. We were assigned to Love Field. Some of us Maniac, some of us were at DFW, but like Love Field, Southwest Airlines had pretty much committed to bringing the soldiers through, no matter what. They had committed, their auxiliary planes and everything to bringing the soldiers in. So they were bringing in as many soldiers as DFW, at Love Field. We were, believe it was at Love Field, and or I might be mistaken. I might have been at DFW, but let me get to the heart of it. It was an NBA USO joint venture. I was there as an entertainer, Mavs Maniac, and of course, then there was players coming. There was like, you won't know which players, and reminded of our etiquette, blah blah blah. Don't speak unless you're spoken to. And I just brought like everything I could. I brought like a case of American flags. Of course, I had at that point, I switched my bandanas. I think I was doing white. I switched to American flag bandanas on, I had my dog collar on, you know what I'm saying? My shirts, I had stuff on me that I could give away, wristbands, whatever I get my hands on, and even American flags to help people that didn't have signs or whatever to greet their people. And that's what I was in the middle of doing, giving out flags, and I had my smile on, my cheese on, and then there it was. I'd seen other, younger players coming out. I'm not fazed, right? I'm professional here. And then I see Walt Clyde Frazier, and I'm like, I get back to work, right? Because he's coming in, right? And then I see Clyde Drexler, Clyde the Glide Drexler. And I was like, Flues, there's Glide and there's Clyde. I was like teaching people the difference, right? And then I'm cool. He coming in. I'm cool. Passing out flags, doing pictures, encouraging. I'm barking and things I can't say on camera, but who I and certain things we say. The military got potty mouth, so and then man, almost like he reminded me of a granddaddy Longleg. His wingspan, though, just the way he got out of his vehicle, I could see in my peripheral, the way he moved, it was different. You know what I'm saying? And he reached up, stood up out of the vehicle, and was doing his hands, and the way his swagger, it was different. It was just different. And I found myself in pause and in awe. And then it was buoyant right. He bumped me. And I was like, huh? And he goes, you okay? I'm like, huh? Iceman. He goes, oh, yeah. You told me about him before. I'm like, yeah, Iceman. He goes, okay. And were helping me. He's like, it's time for us to go in because he's OG. Boyne Wright's OG Maniac. So it's time for us to move in. Anyway, it's our time. We came early, you know. We came as soon as we could get together and go in together. So we were already early anyway, and getting involved. And of course, we're not allowed to speak unless you're spoken to. And so we go over to our section where we're greeting families at this point. We're so early coming in, you know. And so, and then Iceman's like hanging out. And then I look and I see Chris Bosh. And I smile and I nod, what's up? You know, Bosh is like, oh, laughing. He's like, what's up? You know, like nods, what's up? But he doesn't speak, so you can't speak, right? But, you know, and then Iceman is coming in. So Bosh is like, and then slows down, right, for Iceman. And man, when he come through, I just don't know how to describe it. I was still in awe. And then Bosh comes through. He goes, "What's up, dog? What's up, guys? You know." I was like, "Oh, what's up, man? This is that. You know, this blah blah. Hollis family. You know, you know, he's local. You know what I'm saying? You know." And so then at that point, then it's like, okay, we all go in, and then we're all posted to our high five line basically for the social and everything. And then myself and Boyne Wright, we kind of over by Clyde. I spent a good, let's say a good 5 minutes. That's the language. I spent a good 5 minutes with Clyde, with Walt Frazier.
Dang.
And so when it was all wrapping up, kind of coming towards the end like that, and it was thinning out, most soldiers come in, then the families thin out because the soldiers have come through already. And, you know, especially me and Boyne Wright, we would stay to the end to make sure everything and everyone, almost like semi-security kind of, you know. And so Clyde Frazier was like, hey, George, meet my guys. Yeah, it's like, who are these guys? Like, you know, and matter of fact, the look George gave me when he initially saw me was pretty much similar to the same look that Kobe Bryant gave me the first time Kobe Bryant saw me in 2005. You know, I got a dog collar on, or looking all crazy, and you know, 300-pound guys in basketball and athletics doesn't match. And that was my introduction to Iceman, was by Walt Clyde Frazier.
Wow.
So only through Walt Clyde Frazier was I able to shake Iceman's hand, and then the spirit spoke to me. Was like, and I said, you want to meet someone to make your small bag a big bag? I said, you need to talk to Clyde Drexler. That's the money man. He looked at me, he goes, and then we go do our thing. We're wrapping up, and then I guess who I see chopping it up and talking it up, but not like on a bro or player level, right? Like Clyde's, Drexler's like, you know, like they're in a deeper conversation, and Drexler's gestures and then writing stuff down, and Iceman is like intensely eating it up, you know, because, you know, Drexler didn't just do basketball, but he studied finance, accounting and finance, you know, when he came through the University of Houston. So and then he did a lot of work in finance, I guess, on Wall Street and things of that nature. So I hope something really good came out of that, because I know, you know, Iceman wasn't broke, but, you know, it ain't like today's money, you know what I'm saying? So like we talked about before, players going broke, I know he wasn't broke, but, you know, be able to still take care of yourself and your family. I hope something wonderful came out of that. But yeah, you know, so sorry for so much feel good, but, you know, that's my era. That's my era.
And
So,
I
you
was gonna say,
Iceman and Dr. J had a lot in common, and more than just playing in the ABA. But, you know, being a little older, I got to watch some of them, and I always remember Dr. J, his hand in the ball like this, you know, and he would take it up and dunk it, but it's one-handed. But Gervin, it was the finger roll. He was notorious for just going up. They were both about 6'6", 6'7", and that finger roll, the Iceman, just smooth. The way he just laid that hand out and right to the rim. Wasn't fancy like Kyrie Irving, but you had two players similar size, both from the ABA, and they were as much a showman as they were an athlete.
Yes. And George Gervin would double down. He's always doubled down on the show part, on the entertainment part of sports. He goes, yeah, this, yeah, that. But, I was a man of my team. I was a man of my city. I did, what I'm saying? I did things, he quick to remind the youngsters, you wouldn't be where you was without me and those like me, So don't forget about the OGs, So, yes, indeed. There was a time Iceman was in traffic and they jumped with him like he was going to do a jumper, right? So they jumped with him and I was like, mistake. And then there was a defender coming from underneath the basket who knew what was going to happen, right? Coming at him. So he jumped, like he'll do a jump shot. He brought it down the shoulder, right? And as the defender came, the center came from the basket towards him, put it in his face, and then flipped it. And no matter how many times I seen it, when I saw that and it was in the playoffs, I lost my mind. My brother and I, we lost our mind. We were running around the house. We didn't even care like what in. We was like, oh, we could wait to get the playground. Be like, did you see that? Did you see that, Mama? And reenacting it. You got three guys jumping, and then one guy coming at you. You put it in his face, right in his face, and then flip it. And there's nothing he can do about it. It flips right over his fans, over his upright hands, and into the basket.
Wild Dog, when you was mentioning all the posters you had in your room, you and your brother, it reminded me of when I had the same thing. I didn't have a lot of basketball stuff back then because I wasn't into sports during that time frame. I was more into comic books, and I used to do a lot of art and music. I was into those those couple of things: art, music, and comic books. So it reminds me of all the posters I had on my wall.
Yeah, we had some of all of that, but it's like, but I'll tell you the real, it was the Precious, just being honest, the Precious was the Iceman throne poster, of course. As far as the items, not necessarily the person, and then there was the debate. We had the Farrah Fawcett and we had the Jane Kennedy.
Dang. So I was going to also mention, Wild Dog, Bob is hosting today. So Bob, I mean, if you
Yeah, so we're talking Spurs, and I picked Avery Johnson. Back when he was playing, he was known as the Little General.
Yes, sir.
And before I get to the stats, it was one of the things I wanted to say about Avery. He was the first point guard to lead the Spurs to a championship. And he only won one because Parker and Ginobili and Duncan came on later, but he was the first point guard to bring a championship to the Spurs. He was also the first Mavericks head coach to take the team to the NBA Finals.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
He was the fastest coach to 100 wins. And
Coach of the
I
year.
don't think he gets enough credit. People say that he tried to turn Dirk into Duncan, but I will give Avery props that he forced Dirk to have a low post game. They don't win in 2011 without Dirk's spin dribble and parking it at the elbow. And, you can attribute it to Avery forcing him to have a low post game.
Mm.
And then I want to get into something that I know is kind of at the heart for Wild Dog. He is an HBCU Southern University alumni. He's one of only 6 players, only one of 6 players from Southern University to make the NBA. You think about all the NBA players that people know him from Louisiana, New Orleans, and his accent. But we're talking about he was at Southern University when nobody even called it a historic black college university. HBCU wasn't talked about. The Southwest Southern Athletic Conference wasn't talked about.
I am swag.
He had, as I said, he had 1 ring. But the very next year, so 99, 2000, the very next year, they lost in the Western Conference Finals to the Lakers.
Right.
And not just any Lakers, the Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal three-peat Lakers.
Yeah.
So Avery was a point guard on that. And you know, I like to bring career stats. 8.4 points per game, 1.7 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists. He played 16 seasons. It was not heard of in the 90s to play 16 seasons, especially as a small point guard. You got hurt, you got beat up. 16 seasons. He played for the Mavericks twice. 7 times. He doesn't have any MVP awards or All-Star, but 7 times he was in the top 20 in assists out of 16 seasons. 7 times he was in the top 20 in assists.
Mm.
And this, I said no awards, but he was the Joe Dumars trophy he won in the early 2000s as Sportsman of the Year.
Mm.
That'll do it.
That's quite an honor. May not be an award for somebody, but to me, that's an award.
Yeah, for me it is. Yeah.
His career earnings was only $36 million. 16.
How many years he played? You say again?
16.
16. That's in today's standard.
His highest salary was only $8 million. Let me give you a couple other unknown facts about Avery Johnson. He was in a 2000 trade between the Denver Nuggets and the Dallas Mavericks, where Rafe LaFrentz and Nick Van Exel, Avery Johnson was considered a throw-in, but he wound up playing. Everybody knows Nick Van Exel and his shake and bake three-pointers against the Lakers, but Avery was part of that trade. And not only was he part of 2002 trade with Nick Van Exel, but in 2003 they traded Nick Van Exel and Avery to Golden State to get Antoine Jameson. Antoine Jameson played here 1 year. They traded him to Washington. That's turned into Devin Harris. So twice Avery was in 2 really big trades for the Dallas Mavericks. I want to get your thoughts on the, I call them they not name this, Dallas called them triplets, but Duncan, Parker, and Ginobili. And I'll kick it to you, Mike. If we could call them the triplets, what is the legacy of the Spurs triplets?
Duncan, Parker, and Ginobili. Well, I'm gonna start with Ginobili first, and the thing about Ginobili, he was the most unorthodox scorer that I ever seen. He was the one that brought in my opinion, the Euro step, because nobody really seen that before until you seen Ginobili doing it. I'm like, is that a travel? And then when you really examine it, it wasn't a travel because he's landing on one and going to the other side with it, which makes it like dip, and it's a layup. And I get it because you get 2 steps to get to the basket. So, but if you think it in the way the motion of it was like, how the heck did he do that? I've never seen that before. So that's what my main thought with him, as far as him bringing that specific move into the NBA. Now with Parker was a tough guy. He would never complain. He'd get up off the mat and go play some basketball and keep going. You know, the one thing about him is that he wasn't like a phenomenal scorer, but he was a facilitator that did not mind playing a little defense. And he was like more of, I would say, Greg Popovich on the floor. You know what I mean? Because anything Greg wanted done, he'll give it to Parker. And hey, look, I need you to get these guys in place and the XYZ plays run. And Parker would go out there and be Greg Popovich on the floor. So that's one thing I liked about Parker, and he just emphasized what the coach always brought as far as offense defense. And lastly, Tim Duncan, his name says it all. His nickname is Big Fundamental. And he was one of those consummate persons that he was to the book, no matter what. Even in his relationships with his then wife, it was by the books. He didn't divvy off anything. If you say, I need you to jump 15 feet, he gonna give you exactly 15 feet. Everything was by the book with him. He played very good. That's why they call him the Big Fundamental. He knew how to score in low post. He knew how to, and then I think that's probably why they get that up and under from, because like when he gets somebody right underneath him, he'll go up and under them and try to get the basket still and draw the foul. And now you see a lot of players doing that after he's been doing this for so many years. Now you see a lot of players trying to do that. Now they got a rule that you can't do that anymore because so many players was using it now. And the first time I've ever seen it was Tim Duncan. The fact that he didn't shoot threes was not bad. He could shoot threes, but that wasn't his forte. He mainly was a low post guy, and his fundamental skills was one of those things that really made the NBA, well, in general, not the NBA, I'm gonna say it made the Spurs kind of boring at times because they played by the books. But at the end of the day, he made the Spurs champions, and with him and David Robinson at that time too, that's what made them the team that they were. So Tim Duncan,
and Robinson didn't play with him that many years, but
right?
I have a few comments to add. Duncan is kind of like my hockey coach. If you couldn't go turn to your left and your right or switch around, he made sure you could go both sides. So Tim Duncan, to me, it was his bank shot, and he could go over his left shoulder or his right shoulder. It didn't matter, which made it impossible to defend. But it's like time after time after time, you'd see him hit the glass, and his nice bank shot right through the net. And Tony Parker, to me, it was the little pull-up J. The running jumper or the little pull-up J right in front in the paint. And then, when we coached in Carrollton, we actually coached what we called the Ginobili. Was if a defender was behind you, you used your primary hand. If the defender was on the other side, you did the Ginobili, which was instead of the extent of the arm, you went with the offhand. Like you see players, especially Kyrie now, they make their layup with the offhand. And what made his Euro step so effective was instead of doing that ballet, right with this hand, he would use the other offhand, which shielded the defenders. His body was between the defender and him.
And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Ginobili left-handed?
He was left-handed, but if you look at a lot of his layups, he would drive a guy and then lay up with the right hand. His layup was always so that wherever the defender was, the defender couldn't get to the ball.
Facts.
So, Wild Dog, what are your thoughts on the triplets?
Oh man, and I mean traditionally, you have your traditional point guard like Tony Parker, the little general on the floor, right? Representative like the player coach or the general on the floor, and you had your big man, Tim Duncan, and that was your 1-2 punch. That was your gravy. That was everything, and then everybody else was an other. And there were a lot of great teams where they were even full of Hall of Famers. But again, with the respect, we're referring to them as the triplets, or what we would end up calling like your big three. Things changed. Just having 1 or 2 good players to move and shift your team, you needed a big three. And it's almost like the proving ground for this was the Spurs and having their big three, and then other players being the others, filling in their different roles and even rotating and trading in. But you're consistent, players almost from beginning to end for the most part through their strong championship years was Duncan, Parker, and Ginobili. And I'd like to emphasize Ginobili because I always thought of him as some sort of X factor, right? Like, and because I always felt the importance of a 6-man of your bench. Like you have the starters, and the star runs the starters. You had to have a strong bench. Who runs your bench? And I felt like Ginobili was that strong 6-man, even though he started quite a bit. That strong 6-man, that leader of the bench. And I thought that was very critical coming to another phase of basketball where you're getting more highly competitive. The structure of that was very important. And where Greg Popovich, learned to utilize him, learned where to even cut him loose, because there was times where it's like without Ginobili, they were toast. There was times where, they were out of the game and he would strike it up and get them in the game. And then sometimes you lose them the game, but much respect. And I'm so glad that I was concerned that he might slip through the cracks and not get his props, even with the chips and even with Greg Popovich, singing of his praises and his importance and his value to the organization and to the championships. I was concerned at some point that he might fall through the cracks. And I'm so glad that he did not, and that he's gotten his flowers, because a lot of times obscure players who don't fit a certain mold often get, get overlooked or get slighted. And I'm so glad that nobody has not. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something to be said. They won 4 championships in 7 years, every other year. And that's during the Kobe, Shaq, Lakers. So, but,
Yes.
the Triplets had some pretty great surrounding players around them. Sean Elliott, Mario Ellie,
Robert
Danny
Ory.
Manning late in his career, even Wayman Tisdale, Steve
What
Kerr,
about Steven Jackson?
Steven Jackson,
Sometimes,
even
yeah.
Steve Kerr. So, that those three, the Triplets got they got the notoriety, but there was more than a wealth of talent around them that they could go to.
Including Bruce Bowen. So even,
Bruce Bowen,
100% committed in defenders like Bruce Bowen, that's, to fit into your culture and then keep them on and strong with the team. Yeah.
So speaking of championships, let's go into Wild Dog. The Cavs are on a winning streak. Are they a contender?
We talked about this last playoffs, and I knew I was taking an edgy bet with all the injuries and everything, but I said what I said, and even without Donovan Mitchell, I felt like those young men were on something and doing things that preceded next level of ball, next level of competition in the game. And now with the offseason, them able to get healthy, and Mitchell, of course, back in the mix, all the more reason I feel that they are legit. And that's pressure. That's legitimate pressure on everyone else, who's trying to do something. We're doing something good, but now you have to, you introduce the Cavaliers as a problem. The Cavaliers are a legit problem. And of course, the caveat is if they stay healthy. But even last year, with issues with injuries, I felt like they were still able to do damage. I feel like even with some injuries, barring season-ending injuries, they're going to continue to be a problem, and they're going to continue to do damage. And that the East, especially, they're liable to shake it up. The way the East looks now, I feel like not just the Cavaliers holding their own and the number 1, number 2 seed or whatever, but also wrecking, shaking up things in the East with as far as the seeding and the ranking. So I don't expect this team to even to tank anything or to even have any concern about anybody being on the bubble when it comes down the line. When somebody's going up against the Cavaliers and it's rounding towards the end of the season, and they use a win, expect the Cavaliers to ruin people's hopes, to break hearts. That's how I feel about the Cleveland Cavaliers.
So Mike, are the Cavaliers, are they for real?
Now, are they for real? Okay, so let's take a look at what they did in the last 11 games and some of the notable teams that they beat. Number one, they beat the Bucks. They beat the Bucks by 13, and they follow that up by beating the Sixers by 27. And this is just during their winning streak. And they've also beat the Warriors. They beat the Warriors by what, 8? Well, no, not even more than 8. They torched the Lakers. They torched our Mavs, and they handled the Hornets. And the most notable win in this whole thing was the Thunder, which is number 2 in the league in as far as record go. So that 11-game win streak, it's not something to sneeze at because they've really been demolishing the West for whatever reason. They've been playing very good in the West, and I think it's because of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. Those two guys have really been anchoring that defense. With Garland playing the way he plays, as far as him showing that he's a very good number 2 to Spider, I can see why they can be a contender, because if you look at what they got to go through in the East, you have New York, you have New York, you have Boston. Those two teams for sure is going to give them a problem. And if Miami get their act together, they may be a problem for Cleveland as well. But the only two I see that could be an opposing force against Cleveland would be New York and Boston. But yeah, I think they are, if they can get past those two teams in that conference and make it to the championship, they have a very great opportunity to win it all. Hopefully it'll be against the Mavs, which I'm praying for. But yeah, they are contenders in my estimation, seeing who they beat. And that 11-game win streak is not something to sneeze at, the way they've been beating people like in double digits for the most part.
Facts. They're actually on pace for 72, 73 wins, as well as Oklahoma City. So I was at the Cleveland game last week, and even in his rookie year, I looked at Evan Mobley and I'm like, that dude is that dude. And watching him, he's in his 4th year. As Wild Dog likes to say, they turned the corner, but he's a beast. He's 6'11", and he's not a skinny 6'11". People look at the stats offensively, but defensively, he is no slouch defensively. We talk about two-way wing players like Kawhi Leonard and, back in the day, Kobe and all, but two-way power forwards, as Wild Dog likes to say, power forwards. Like Evan Mobley is he's just a beast. I like what you said. Jared Allen is the perfect center. The Mavs tried to trade for him. He does exactly what you need when you've got a guy like Mobley. He defends, you leave him off. It's like Dunk City. And we're not even talking about lobs. It's just Mobley is a good enough passer that people come over to double team him, and it's like a free 2 points for Jared Allen. And I'm glad you mentioned Darius Garland. I've been watching him grow as one reason they traded Markkanen and Sexton. But against the Mavs, Garland got whatever he wanted. Now, I know we had some injuries, but still, it's like contested shots. They're still playing against NBA players, and Garland, he made it look like he was playing against high school guys. He got to wherever he wanted to go. He got whatever shot he wanted to go. He's really underrated, I think. And then you got Strus off the bench, and then Carlos LeVert. Like
Michigan.
Yeah, LeVert has got that huge contract. They tried to trade him, but I think we talked about this last year with Bickerstaff being coach of the year, and they fired him at the end of the year last year. So they got, they're doing this with a new coach in his first year.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of reminds you of what happened with Mark Jackson and the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
And it happened in Toronto a little bit with, Coach of the Year getting let go. And he had been with the Mavericks, and it's kind of messy, but that's why they say it's all about the players. And if you have a strong organization, I think that's almost like a hint, indication of not only that the core talent is there that they put together, but also the organization as a whole is strong enough to balance that out for a new coach to come in and have stability.
They play like the defense and their recovery. I was just watching. I mean, the score was much closer than what it indicated, but they basically were ahead 20 to 30 points most of the game, and when the scrubs come in. But they rotate. Kevin Atkinson and his offensive and defensive coaches, they smother people and they rotate and they help with it was beautiful to watch their defense, and offensively that ball moved from side to side. And when you get a team chasing the ball from side to side, you open up a whole lot of stuff. I think they'll give the Celtics and the Knicks some fits.
And like you mentioned, man, and I always, as a former coach myself, ball movement is going to win you more games, especially if you got good defense. And that was my two main priorities. Defense, play defense first, as hard as you can. And then when you on the other end of the floor, how do you relax? By moving the ball, because they're going to chase the ball. You don't have to. You just got to keep it moving, make the ball move, and your body moving. And it's hard to be the team that knows how to move a ball.
Yeah. And then I want Bob, if I can make a comment about something, if I could do a little leak. But with all what shout out to Cerebro and all the data they're collecting, but I don't know what they're going to end up calling it, or if it'll actually even work out, or if it'll just be something under the covers. But there's a thing almost like the Golden State rule, like what does a championship team look like, right? And one of the things about the Golden State Warriors dynasty is basically their percentage of points per game, like their offensive power, being an offensive juggernaut, right? Because it takes points to win, and then defense helps you win close championships, right? So at this point, the Cleveland Cavaliers, out of 37 games, they have 20 games with 120 points or more. That's at a rate of over 54%. So if you don't like the takes, follow that data. Win or lose, they're not giving away anything. So keep in mind, and with that, your team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, or any team, take a closer look at what Cerebro was digging around with the Golden State Warriors dynasty, and how many 120 plus point games they had, during their dynasty to be such a powerhouse.
Nice.
So this next question goes to you, Mike. NBA podcasts, are they beneficial?
NBA podcast, as you can see, if you look down below us, there's a guy who's wearing a Swish for Real shirt. And if I have to say if they're beneficial, heck yeah, because it gives you so much entertainment value, man. And these guys are speaking from experience, especially when you look at podcasts. Gilbert Arenas, his podcast is like one of the main ones that people watch. And the Knuckleheads, with the two guys, Matt and Steven Jackson's podcast, Up and Smoke podcast. You know what I mean? There's a lot of great ones out there, man. It's beneficial for two reasons. One, you're getting stories that you probably wouldn't hear unless you was an NBA player and you played on these teams. And two, if you get a big enough following, it grows. And then when you grow your following, then you have this massive amount of money that YouTube's going to pay you. And Shannon Sharp podcast, even though it's not basketball, he has people on there. The podcast he did with Cat Williams raked up numbers, man. And it was over a couple million views on that one podcast. And I don't know exactly how much they got paid, but I know it was in the millions that they got paid for that podcast because it racked up so many views, likes, shares, subscribes, and it just grew his podcast. So yeah, it's very beneficial when it comes to learning the sport. As far as basketball goes, some coaches they teach the game through podcasts, and if you're willing to learn and listen and take the whole however many long hours it takes, or less than hours, I guess, for most podcasts, however long it takes to listen to get that information, it's very beneficial. And there's a lot of good ones out there. And my favorite one so far is Swish for Real. So I got to keep plugging us. So we have good guys come on. We're getting bigger, we're getting better, and I think it's beneficial because we have some great stories, great comments. We dig a little deeper in numbers, and typically we're a numbers type podcast. And plus, we talk about great stories, history for the most part. Because I mean, everybody on this panel is an NBA historian in essence. You know what I mean? I like it in the NBA because of what it done for me as a young man to keep me out of trouble. So yeah, it's very beneficial as far as podcasts go, especially for the listening value.
And didn't JJ Redick do a podcast before he became the Lakers coach?
Yes.
Yeah, he did it with LeBron.
So it works in reverse, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to interrupt, Boogie, but before I forget, but my biggest thing, like regardless of sport, but especially basketball, Broham, what are you gonna do after basketball? It's gonna last forever. What's your plan for your life after basketball? You know, and even the Black Mamba, even a little bit of time you got to spend with him, it's like, what's your plan after basketball? I'm not trying to rub you the wrong way, you know what I'm saying? But basketball can always be your life. And look what Kobe did with it, you know what I'm saying? And even winning an Oscar. So life after basketball is important. So this niche with doing podcasts is critical for opportunities for players for their life after basketball. You don't have, you know, your love of the game can still continue on until your last breath. So that is infinitely valuable. And it's not just players. I'm not a player. I'm a former player, but not in the NBA, a former entertainer. You got executives, you got all kind of folks. We got even Tony King from the Drumline, working with us on some things, and some other folks, equipment managers and people that I knew, and dancers that were all trying to get their input for their love of the game. So it's not even just, players that you're getting out there. And then even folks like Shannon Sharp, who played basketball, even in college, right? So he knows and covers all sports. So a lot of times the love of the sport of basketball, is going to come at different angles, whether you were, a pro in a different sport. So many different athletes came up, playing basketball, including Coach Prime himself, was a star basketball player in high school. He just, had to pick his juice, football and baseball moving forward. But he was a, Mr. Basketball in Florida, you know what I'm saying? He was more known as a basketball player, really, at some point in time. So, it gives an opportunity in a mix for not just former, big star players, but also coaches, executives, personalities. I just saw a podcast about a former NFL cheerleader, and about her experiences and her stories about, legends and things. And these stories are coming from all kind of places, not just, the quote unquote, stars or, NBA players themselves. Is given a great opportunity. And a lot of times it's stories that how can I put it? There's a written rules and there's unwritten rules that you cannot speak. Like if one of my media friends came and interviewed me, there's certain things I'm never ever going to bring up that I would be like, I'm going to take to my grave, right? But let's say, Devin Harris, who's being a commentator and doing broadcasts, if he goes, Dogg, I want to do an interview with you, or come talk to me about, our days with the Mavericks, and he asked me something, I can answer. You understand? I can be a 100% transparent with Devin Harris, even like Kiki Vandeweghe, or certain personalities, people that I've known, and have history with, Michael Finley or whatever, certain like that. But otherwise, I would go to my grave with it. But if they ask me, I could tell them, but not anybody else. Real talk.
I'm glad you brought up Kiki Vandeweghe, because he said he had a lot of knowledge, and if you remember, he said we have a duty to pass it along.
Yes.
And I think this podcast will outlive all three of us, and this one way to pass the information along.
Especially stories, man, because Kiki had some stories, man.
Yes.
It was the most joyous podcast we had so far as having some guests on, and his was an amazing one.
Come on back, Kiki, if you listen. So this next question, we'll start with you, Wild Dog. Are the injuries affecting the Mavericks?
Yes, and as far as I'm concerned, I think it's a good thing because, again, let's stretch the bench out. Let's get all these guys minutes. Let's really shake it out and see what you're working with. Let's see what they're made of. Are they here to roll and play? Are they here to help us get over the hump, right? Or are they just collecting a paycheck? When your star players are down, you got to stretch that bench out. I mean, you got to stretch your talent out to face, full on, healthy teams and see what you got, And you can say, oh, we already knew what we had. No, you don't necessarily know. And that's how players and things slip through the cracks, right? And when you have a player, you end up trading and they end up shining. It's like, well, how come they didn't shine for us? Because we had blinders on and we didn't give an opportunity to really see what the man was made of. So this is a perfect opportunity. Injuries happen. And for me, I feel it's a blessing. Stretch the bench out, stretch those minutes out, and let's see what these young men are made of. So when we come after the All-Star break, that's really when you really want to be healthy and all pistons rolling, everything, your machine rolling as you come out of the All-Star break, rolling strong and staying healthy, going to make a push for the playoffs. This is just a natural order of how things work. And that's why you have the cup in the first half of the season, because, any other tournament in basketball, you really recognize that, tournaments are good. Competition is good. It's a show. But then also that is in the first part of the season, your number one seed could be rocking and rolling, right? Theoretically, they could be rocking and rolling. They should be recognized for having such a great team, right? But by the time the championship comes at the end of the season, they could be a complete wreck. They could be a complete mess. They could be, full of injuries and snake bitten, right? So there is two halves to a season, and I feel like really this is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for growth of the bench and flexing. We saw what Lively did the other day, man, and the time to do that is now. It's not after the All-Star break. The time for this kind of things to go down is now. It's perfect timing.
So how much credit do you give Coach Kidd for allowing the players on the end of the bench to spread their wings?
Well, this is his job, And
well, with Carlisle's job too, but Carlisle didn't play past the 7th or 8th men.
Right, but then it being your job, then you have a certain way of your philosophy and how you take on it, right? And injuries are going to happen. Sometimes you don't have a choice, right? And then sometimes you have coaches that still only stick with, okay, I got 2 or 3 guys down. Who are my next 5 that I'm going to play, or maybe 6 that I'm going to play, right? Where what I'm saying and what I kind of see Kidd flexing growing into is like, okay, our stars are down. Our matchups don't look good. Everybody gonna get some minutes. I'm gonna try to put everybody in a situation to see and show and flex what you've got. And you're gonna show me if I'm gonna see who you are. If I don't like who you are, then I'm gonna stick you at the end of the bench. That's my philosophy, and that's really, I can't say at this point exactly what I'm seeing from Kidd, but I believe that's what I'm seeing from Kidd. I can't confirm that for you just yet. But I believe
Coach Mike and I, we were big on developing players because, like college, we always had players aging out. But there was an interview just yesterday about Coach Kidd and Spencer Dinwiddie. He's like, I know you can do this, but here's what I need you to do.
Exactly, 100%.
And so Big Mike.
And some of that could just be a test, because he knows at some point that's what he's going to need from him. And if any time, this is the time to say, okay, let me see if the man can come through with this. It may not exactly needed what he needed at the time, but in the big picture of things, this is big picture talk. That's what he's going to need to call on him for. So the testing, the proving ground is to do it right now, not when we're rolling. We have to have the win or the optics of it. Even if we lose the game here and now, it's the optics of it looks better. So the time to test Dinwiddie, if he can deliver this for me now, I need to know it now. This is the time the proving ground for it.
So, Big Mike, you're coach. Are the injuries impacting the Mavericks?
Yes and no. Reason why I say yes and no, let's go with the yes part. The yes part is because you're going to need everybody to gel. And I've always been preaching this since the beginning of the season. Since it's pretty much almost a new squad, you still have your nucleus in place with Kyrie, Luka, Lively, PJ. And PJ has been amazing in this stretch. And you need all those people. But at the same time, you want to see if they can gel more so without the starters that are typically in there, because now you're really working on a thin bench. And at the same time, you're looking at which player, if you play them all at the same time. Well, let's take Hardy, for instance. What can Hardy really bring in trade value? So how do we know what people want for him if they don't see him play? So let him play as much as he can, starting him and showing him how he could be a starter. All these things play a role when it comes to if he's trade value. So if he's playing very good, then yeah, his trade value will be up, and that's the no part of it. If you losing a good player like that and you don't get anything returned, then that's bad. But the injuries, like Kyrie's out with the lumbar sprain, Luka's with the calf strain, and then you still have X amount who has had that right wrist surgery. So now it's one of those things of when you get all these guys back, particularly I want to see what Dante is going to be like. If he's going to be much more better than what he was last year, or will he digress from being on injury reserve for so long? But it all depends as far as what the Mavs can do in regards to the bench still gelling together, if they can continue to play like they played these last two games. But it was a telltale sign to see that they can play good against good teams when they really fought back when they played against Cleveland. They could have easily tied that game up later on, but it just took so much energy out of them when they had to catch up, and then they took their starters out, and then when the bench players of Cleveland came in, they still kind of played very well. But then Dallas, I guess they got their butt in gear, like, hey, let's play. And they start playing like they know they can play, like they've been to a championship the year before. But the bench needs to really focus on being better. And the injuries does have a factor in it. You're missing, again, your point guard. You have 2 point guards out, which is Kyrie and Luka. So those are your guards. So now you're running Dinwiddie at the guard, and you're running Quentin Grimes at the guard. So it's one of those situations where you're doing a Frankenstein type of piece together team out there, and you're trying to see what works. And Kid is starting to see what works and what doesn't work. And I'm thinking Hardy is a good trade piece, and I don't want to see him go because he's a very good quality backup player. But I believe he deserves to start somewhere that he can really blossom. Quentin Grimes can take that time that we've given Hardy, because Quentin Grimes been really balling, and he plays some great defense. And with Najee coming back off a suspension, those two playing on that second team has showed you that they could be starters anywhere. And Grimes is going to get his money at the end of the season, whether he's going to sign back with Dallas or he's going to be a starter for some other team. And all he's doing at the same time with Hardy is showing people, hey, I'm a starter, and this is what I want to be. I'm going to show you that I can play. And when we get to the championship, hopefully we're going to win it. And then you can definitely pay me my money because I know I'm worth every penny. So, yeah, the injuries do hurt, but at the same time, it is a benefit for the players to get that time for other teams to see how they play and if they can gel with other teams, if they choose to stay with the Mavs or leave.
Facts. A good point. And, the New York Knicks traded Quentin Grimes and Precious Akua and all that to get OG Anunoby, and Q wasn't getting much time on the Knicks, like Wild Dog said earlier. It's like sometimes you don't know why you got a guy, but he could. I think they got more players that can create their own shot. Where last year you had athletes. The notes that I wrote down kind of tag into what both of you said. I wrote down it's an adjustment period, not just for the players but from the coach as well. Figuring out, they're winning by playing more together ball, but their shooting percentage pretty much is mostly. Mark Jackson said it's a make or miss league, but right now they don't have the bandwidth to miss shots. When they shooting hot, they've been winning. When they're not, so they don't have that stud that they can go to. They can make up for a few mistakes, and it takes time to get into a new role. Like I was saying, kids said, "This is what I need you to do, Spencer." And Dinwiddie and Brunson played in that Utah series a couple years ago when Luka was hurt.
Yes.
So it just shows you that Spencer coming back was a really good bonus in depth. I'm seeing one thing just as a observer. There's better ball movement and there's balanced scoring right now. And so you look at the number of shots each person's taken is pretty even, and the ball it's not getting stuck, and sometimes they look like they don't know what they want to do in a set, but there is better ball movement and more balanced scoring. And then my next point, all coaches in just about every sport said, adversity, you're going to have it. Adversity is what develops is iron that sharpens iron. So they can't depend on their two big horses. And I was so glad to watch last night's game when the coach unleashed Derek Lively and said, "Hey, we need you to shoot. You're a great passer and a great setting up the offense, but we need you to shoot a little more." And I've been saying that. Let him take a couple 3-pointers, make him a threat. Now the dribble handoff is a completely different animal. And by the way, he had 21 points and 16 rebounds last night.
And a few blocks.
And 4 blocks. So adversity is good for development. That's iron sharpening iron. The one negative is the lack of a go-to player when you got to get buckets at the end of the game. That's when Kyrie and Luka show up. Yeah. But then they had like an 18-2 run last night to win.
Yeah.
And it came from the defense. It came from Grimes and PJ, and it came from the defense. It wasn't so much this. Of course, they had some great 3-pointers, and as you texted me, and one when Grimes went to the hole. But that's really the only drawback I see is in the really close games, that lack of a go-to player, and you're seeing PJ's leadership come through and Gafford and Lively's leadership come through. So Nico's always looking to improve. If I think there's 2 players, if they were to move, it would be probably Maxey or Omax Prosper. But he's always looking to upgrade, and the one position is if they could get a burly power forward, a Marquise Morris in his younger days, or a twin brother, somebody who, when Evan Mobley's playing, who's also 6'9", 6'10", and got some weight on him and can body up, a Julius Randle or Evan Mobley. They don't. Yeah. PJ does great, but he's a little outsized. He makes up for it with speed and hustle and determination. But if you could move Prosper and Cleveland and get that kind of a guy that can come in, not have to be a starter, but can come in and kind of grind against that power forward, I think that would be really good. So this next question, let's start with you, Mike.
I think, can you hear him? I think your phone, something's off.
No, someone tried to call. Another scam call. I've only had 15 today.
Check the do not disturb.
And before we move on, I was going to say, man, I've been really pleased to see what PJ has blossomed into it here in Dallas, even though he had a up and down season while he was playing in Charlotte, but he looks so comfortable. He feel like he's home, which this is his home as far as where he was raised at, but you could tell he's actually like playing here, and I like that about PJ this season and last season.
And Big Mike, I know Boogie's heard me complain about this far too many times, but there's a reference I have about watching TV. You're on the court, right? You know who the star players are, and you freeze, and you're just watching them. Like, what are they going to do? You're just watching them play instead of being engaged and involved. And if there's ever a cure for TV watching, this is it. So that's why another reason I'm so excited, Boogie.
Well, Wild Dog, the first time he sat next to me, I gave him a warning. I said, "You're going to get a fan, a color commentator, and analyst all in one."
Yeah.
And we've been talking basketball the whole game. I swear, everybody around us, but those two guys shut up. And then the others are like, "Man, we learned a lot about the game," because we're not just watching the stars. We're watching what else is going on in the movements and adjustments.
And everybody's watching Luka with the ball or Uncle Drew to make a move. And I'm calling out somebody who's just over there, like sitting on their hands. I'm like, because I know that's not going to work. That's not going to work for championship ball, Yeah.
So this next question, the Carl Anthony Towns trade to New York, Mike. I'm going to serve that up to you first.
All right. Got out of there. All right. Carl Anthony Towns, Cat is what we call him here. The thing about him I like so much is that he's a great three-point shooter for the most part. He has a great average as far as three-point shooting, and that's something that Julius Randle wasn't giving you. And you could see the difference between the two players as they play on different squads now. If I had to say who's doing better, it's Carl Anthony Towns, because he fits right well with what Bronson brings. Bronson is bringing everything you could possibly want in a guard, and he can play a little bit of defense. You know what I mean? And Carl Anthony Towns just really complements him better than what Julius Randle was doing, because Julius, he's a low post threat, but I don't think he has the love for the game like he used to. You know what I mean? Like when he was with the Lakers, he had the love for the game and he wanted to play. And he felt like the Showtime Lakers was everything for him. But when he got traded those couple of times, it's like he doesn't feel the same about the game. And you can see it in his play. And you can see how he's complaining to the refs a little bit more as far as Julius Randle. And it's not beneficial for him right now. It's not fun. Now, and you look at the other spectrum of it.
He lost his love for the game when he got a bunch of this.
True that. And that could be a factor as well. But when you're looking at Cat Williams, he is like enjoying New York. He was like, this is like the big stage, way better than Minnesota, man. Minnesota was cold, and I mean it's cold in New York too.
Small market. Yeah.
Right. And he's a big market kid. You're gonna play in front of thousands of people every game. You're not gonna skip on eyes. And you're playing with a great point guard again with Bronson. So I think Carl Anthony Towns, the trade benefits New York 100-fold. You can't sneeze at that because he's playing phenomenal with these guys, and he's doing everything you would think a player that when he came from Minnesota would do. I mean, he's blocking shots, he's getting rebounds, he's scoring, and he's smiling as he does it. He didn't do it that much as far as, and I don't know if it would have to do anything with the coaching or the team or the chemistry that they had in Minnesota. But now with New York, the chemistry seems like it's something that he really wanted to happen in Minnesota. But now he gets to New York, and you can see
wasn't Thibodeau the coach in Minnesota for a couple of years there when Cat was in there?
Probably so. I believe so. And then the fact that he probably wanted to play for Thibodeau again, and Thibodeau wanted him as well. And you could tell, because look at what Cat's doing. And they're a threat in the East with just having Cat there. And, the New York added more pieces to it, like you mentioned earlier. But the two key components is Bronson and Cat. So Cat has been a plus for New York. And I don't see if he would have stayed in Minnesota, what would it have been? Because you got Cat and Gobert. That was a bad fit. But now it's still a bad fit for Gobert and Julius Randle. So it just I'm kind of glad that Cat did go to New York. So it benefits New York, and Minnesota's, in my opinion, got the short end of the stick.
Well, I got a couple follow-up questions. Isn't Cat from New York originally?
I'd have to do my research, but I believe you're correct.
I'm thinking he was either born or grew up or played there. He had some New York roots.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know he's an offensive player. In your opinion, do you think Cat is a defensive player? Is he more stretch four, or is he actually a defensive center that can help him?
Now, as I said earlier, he is playing like he wants to win now. You know what I mean? In Minnesota, he didn't play that way. So if you're playing like you want to win, that means he's going to play more defense, grab more rebounds, and play better with his supporting cast. So yeah, I think he's defensively, and I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but defensively, I think he's actually made himself a little better in New York.
That's right.
So Wild Dog, what are your thoughts on the Karl Anthony Towns trade to New York?
Hey, for us Southern guys, you know, because I wanted to say yes to you, but yeah, Edison, New Jersey. Cat's out of Edison, New Jersey. So for us Southerners, that's basically the same as New York. So essentially, culturally wise, you know, New York and New Jersey is it's kind of blurred. It's blurred, you know, the culture between New York and New Jersey. But there's two things I wanted to be sure I brought up. You know, I'm a little bit off color, but we brought up podcasts today, and I remember thinking to myself when Cat was on Club Shay Shay earlier this year, or not this year, but later last year. And I was like, man, this is wonderful. You know, this is, people can see the side of Cat that I already knew of or knew about, you know? And when we had this discussion about, is he overrated or underrated? And I was like, no, he's underrated, you know, he's underrated, you know, but it was a struggle, you know, because of the optics of everything, you know? And so I'm like, I'm so very glad that is, like you said, Boogie, on permanent record with the podcast on Club Shay Shay, you know, the Timberwolves version of, or the Cats Timberwolves is on record. Because sometimes when you move on, people forget, right? Right? Because
Kevin Garnett had to leave Minnesota to get his ring.
That's where I was going. Because if you say Kevin Garnett, right, all they think of is you know, in the Celtics.
He got the tip.
They forget, even when they see the videos of Kevin Garnett in a Timberwolves uniform, you know, doing his thing. They're like, when did he play for the Timberwolves?
Mm-hmm.
So that's my two takes on it. I'm glad the Timberwolves Cat is on record, thanks to podcasts. But man, the future is bright. It's reminiscent of Kevin Garnett being pulled out of Minnesota, being pulled into a huge basketball market, and making it do what it do. Whatever it's going to do, we already see the Cat is making it do what it do. In life, difference makes a change, or change makes a difference. Yes, sir.
Yes, so y'all pretty much covered it. One of the things I will add is that I actually think, I mean, New York had a lot of draft capital, you know, so they could basically go buy any player they had because they had so many first round picks and second round picks that they've been gathering, you know, over the years. I for trade value, I actually like the OG Anunoby trade better than the Cat trade. And I think when Cat was in Minnesota, he was relegated to be a stretch four. He didn't want to get dirty. He didn't want to bang around. He didn't really want to play center. And when Rudy got there, he's kind of like, okay, you got that. I'm going to just hang out here and take 3-pointers.
Yeah.
And, you know, they had Mike Conley. in Minnesota, so he had some
Mhm.
good point guards. But Brunson's game, maybe it's because he played at Dallas. His game's very similar to the way he starts and stops, gets into the paint, the little fadeaway, the off speed, the alley oops. Very similar to Luka's game, just a different sized body.
Mhm.
But I think the big difference is you don't have to have the lob threat with Cat. Is he can score, he can pick and pop, or he can pick and roll. And if you look across the board, hardly anybody's talking about Brunson as MVP. And last year he was getting a lot of talk. Now they had injuries and he carried the Knicks team. But
Right.
if I'm not mistaken, Brunson's numbers are down all the way across the board. So that tells you what Cat is bringing. And OG, and Mikal Bridges is not lighting it up like he did in Brooklyn, but he definitely helped the Knicks. As we started earlier in the show, I just, man, if the Knicks have to play the Cavaliers, I think I would have to go with Wild Dog. Like I have to put some money on the Cavaliers. I like Cat as a player, but is he enough to, he's got to make up his mind to get dirty every now and again and not just be a stretch four, actually be a center.
I agree.
Well, it's been a great show, guys. Thank you, Big Mike, for letting me host. Wild Dog, tell all the people where they can find you on social media and what have you.
Hey, I don't be doing too much. I'm a good dog. So you can find me on YouTube at Wild Dog 357 on YouTube. That's WILDDOWG 357 on YouTube. And always, baby, representing Swish for real.
And Big Mike, where can we find you on social media?
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a great show, and I would love to come back on again if you had me. You can find me on Twitter at Mikhail Lampkin, and then just put poet behind that. I'm on there, and I'm also Mikhail Lampkin on YouTube as far as poetry again. And when I talk basketball, I always like to be on Swish for real.
For real. So you can find me on YouTube, Swish for real. But I'd like to kind of end the show with just a prayer and a shout out to all those people in California and the wildfires out there. We do the podcast, but we're all believers, and so we believe in the power of prayer, and we're just praying for all those people in California that are enduring. And so be sure to subscribe right here. Swish for real.
That way.
Out of here.
We out. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.